welcome to the Career Corner, where we answer your career cues. I'm your host, Lucas Kaufman, and we got a really awesome guest for today, talking about something that might not necessarily, might not make the initial association that this is career related, but always remember the most important thing you can do to make everything in your life easier is to be happy and healthy. So today, in time for Valentine's Day, we are joined by Arielle to talk about maintaining relationships, relationship care, and self-love. Arielle, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
And we are so excited to have you. So we're going to dive right into things, starting things off. Introduce yourself to the people at home. Where'd you go to school? What'd you go to school for? And what are you doing now?
Okay, so do we want to just know undergrad or do we want to know all of it?
The whole shebang.
Okay, so my name is Arielle, like Lucas said. I went to undergraduate at Ithaca. And then I went for my master's at Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, so in Philadelphia for 2 years. So I went for my master's in counseling and clinical health psych. And then about 4 years after that, I went for my PhD at UC Riverside, it's University of California, Riverside, in social and political psych.
Incredible. And today we're talking about relationships and self-love. What first drew you to specializing in this field, and how has your understanding of self-love evolved through your education and your time working with clients?
Super good question. It's a tough question. I would say high school was really when I realized like my need to understand others, and kind of like through my own struggle and upbringing, I was able to see myself and then others, if that kind of makes sense. And then that further developed through conversations with friends. And I was able to kind of connect their pain points to their behaviors and motivations. And that made me want to like deeply understand and help people. I think your second part of your question was how self-love evolved through working with clients. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So like my understanding of self-love has evolved throughout my life and relationship with so many people, but with clients, what's become most apparent to me is our relationship with ourselves is the most important one. And it's something I see come up time and time again. And if we don't honor and listen to it first, we often end up in situations that don't truly serve us. And we can spend a lot of time trying to figure that out.
Yeah, absolutely. And as an expert, could you tell us what healthy self-love actually looks like in practice, and what are some examples people at home might recognize from their own lives that they're just doing naturally? Just what does self-love look like?
Yeah, it's a good question. And you're absolutely right. It's not just about thought, it's about feeling good about ourselves. And you're right. It has so much to do with actions and eventually habits that promote well-being. So I feel like the biggest thing I talk to my clients about all the time and even practice with myself is taking care of your body and mind throughout rest, nourishment, and self-care. And some of the other ones that maybe either people are doing or are not doing could be setting healthy boundaries, speaking to yourself with kindness, which is a huge one, definitely prioritizing our needs, and then feeling and expressing our emotions without judgment is also a pretty big one. I think those are the biggest that come to the top of my head just right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And while we're talking about self-love, we're talking today about relationships too. I feel like a very common phrase that people hear today, maybe more than they did in the past, is that, you can't really love somebody and be in a healthy relationship until you can really love yourself. And that's something I've definitely experienced, especially in high school when I was very dramatic about romantic relationships. And I was always
Totally.
like, but people would tell me, you have to love yourself first. So how true is that? And how does self-love play into your relationships with other people?
Such a good question. It's honestly, it's so nuanced. I love this question. I think about it a lot. It's going to be a little hard for me to speak concisely about it, but I'm going to try.
Sure.
So I feel like self-love and the ability to love others are not mutually exclusive, and they don't develop linearly. So like you don't need one doesn't precede or come before the other, right? But it is absolutely true that a strong foundation of self-love helps us engage in relationships from a place of wholeness rather than lack. So like when you're whole all by yourself, for example, like you're doing your thing, you're going to your classes, you're getting A's, you're doing your assignments, you're going to the gym, you're eating healthy, whatever. Like if you're doing that for you, you're in a state of self-love. But if you're motivated by those things because you want to be noticed or you want to make someone else happy, we're often coming from a place of lack. So you see what I mean? Like sometimes we search so hard to be loved by other people, thinking it'll make us whole, when in reality, what we really need is love, like for and from ourselves. So it's like, that being said, we do not develop self-love in isolation. It's often through healthy relationships or even negative ones that can honestly teach us the biggest lessons. But like, all of that being said, you don't need to be perfectly healed or love yourself unconditionally to be in a relationship, but absolutely awareness of your self-worth and patterns in order to give and receive love in healthy ways is so fundamental to like this aspect of self-love.
So expanding on that, how what are some of the most common barriers that you see preventing people from developing a healthy sense of self-love, and how do those barriers manifest in relationships?
Yeah. This is complex, but I'll name them at a very surface level. So common barriers can be past trauma. Absolutely, like trauma can bleed through so many aspects of our lives, and I feel like that's just an important one to name. But also, like some of the things I see most commonly with clients or even with friends or even in myself are feelings of not enough or worthlessness, which can be developed many different ways. So that can include our upbringing or unhealthy relationships, whether romantic or friends, being bullied, growing up in an environment where love was conditional or there was like emotional neglect, which makes it difficult for us to like recognize our own worth or needs. So honestly, I would say like the two things that I would really highlight there are feelings of not enough or worthlessness. And that I think totally prevents people from developing a sense of self-love. And then these barriers manifest in so many ways in relationships. I guess the most obvious is like by creating imbalance, right? Insecurity or really unhealthy like dynamics between you and another person. And what often really like kind of comes through is like difficulty receiving love or seeking constant validation from a partner such that like you're relying on them for your entire self-worth. Something I often see too is like people pleasing and poor boundaries, attracting unhealthy relationships. So people that just don't treat us well or aren't good for us. Some people will often like overcompensate with control to mask insecurity. We can lose our own personal identity in relationship, and just overall insecurity. So like these barriers totally manifest by like creating like bigger imbalances in a dynamic, which can just really lead to toxic relationships.
Yeah, and obviously all those things are, negatively impacting yourself and your relationships. And you mentioned earlier that tough situations like that can teach you really valuable lessons, but ideally we avoid being in those tough situations in the first place. So, in your experience, what are the most crucial self-care practices that contribute to maintaining healthy relationships and avoiding those things? Because obviously it's easy to say, well, just don't do that.
Right.
Don't, you know, those things you said. Don't do this.
Yes,
How do we actually avoid those things and not do them?
absolutely. So I feel like three of the ones that I would name that are the most important, or at least can be crucial, are emotional regulation is huge in a healthy romantic relationship. So knowing and learning your own emotions and practicing communicating them in healthy ways, really reducing reactivity. And some of the ways people do this is by like journaling, therapy, just communicating, like figuring out a way to emotionally regulate is huge. Maintaining individual identity. So that can be through kind of personal goals, hobbies, friendships, and self-growth. And then setting boundaries. That's huge in relationships in any way. And basically, like I would just suggest with boundaries is communicating your limits and your needs, and that really serves to protect your personal well-being and ensure kind of mutual respect within the relationship.
Yeah, and speaking of mutual respect in the relationship, you also mentioned earlier that, while tough relationships can teach you those lessons, a strong, healthy relationship can really uplift you and help you carry on in your journey of self-love and these practices. You can support each other. So, what are some of the ways that couples can support each other and help themselves grow? And you can individually establish for yourself, like these are my boundaries, but what are some things you can do together as couples to support each other?
Spend time alone, even though you said together. I think the huge piece of this is spending time alone. I always suggest to my couples, like, what are we doing alone? How are we filling our own cup when we're not in this relationship? How do we not depend on the relationship for meeting every single one of our needs? Because that's just straight up not realistic. So definitely spend time alone. supporting each other's goals and hobbies. Of course, there can be things that we do together and we enjoy doing together and we love to do together, but also having your own and having your own friends is so important and healthy. Um, I mentioned before practicing kind of like healthy communication, but open communication, share your goals and what is important to you. Don't just get lost in the relationship. Don't lose your goals. And then all of the boundaries, literally, like physical, financial, communication, emotional boundaries, commitment boundaries, like talking out. Essentially, when I say boundaries, it's like, where do you end and where do I begin? What's my kind of like stance on this? What's yours? Like all of that is so important. Talking just in general is so important in relationships around this.
Yeah, absolutely. Communication, I think, is definitely a big point of pain for a lot of couples that might not be working out. So definitely very important to communicate, establish those boundaries. But, God forbid somebody finds themselves in a situation, where their relationship is in a tough spot, they're feeling a lot of tension with their partner, or they've experienced a breakup. How do they continue with self-love in the face of those kind of stressful circumstances?
Yeah, that's a good question. I always remind my clients that I know that their heart in life feels completely shattered at the moment, and it's so hard to find the motivation to do anything. But in these moments, showing up for yourself is everything. And what I mean by that, it means like, for example, make yourself that meal, even if you don't feel like eating, calling a friend or a sibling just to check in, move your body, whether it's going to the gym or just taking a short walk. I know it's super cold in Ithaca right now, so that's maybe not always the best, but you get what I mean there. Saying no to the night out if you know it won't actually help, and then like resisting the urge to distract yourself with a hookup just to forget. Also, stay connected with to your integrity and sense of self. The quick fixes, numbing out with drinking, ignoring your feelings, these things won't actually make the pain disappear. When you wake up, those emotions are still going to be there. So instead, I really encourage my clients, and I've done this in my own practice, invest in yourself, take care of yourself like you would a close friend going through this. You absolutely deserve that and you need that. That's the thing that's going to help you return back to it time and time again.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of those things that you mentioned, cooking for yourself and making these decisions, sometimes it can be really hard to find the motivation to do those things on your own. So I wanted to ask you, what are some resources that, particularly students, because we got a lot of IC folks who listen here. How can students and just anyone, what kind of resources do people have access to, or should they look for if they're in a situation that's tough, involved with a relationship or self-love? Where can they go to get help if they don't feel like they can do it all by themselves?
It's a really good question. So I'm not super plugged in, but you'll have to tell me this. Like, there's still, okay, is there a counseling center in Ithaca? Like,
There
is
is,
therapy
yes.
offered?
Yes.
So that absolutely is, I don't know what that looks like for you all, but that's always a good place. I know that there's crisis lines that you can absolutely call, and I'll provide you that information. But if not, if people are looking for a therapist, I would say just because I'm coming from the world of therapy, like if you need a therapist, like if you're looking for that, Psychology Today is a great place to find a therapist, mental health match. Um, but there also are in New York direct resources that you can call just to talk to people, and I will look for those and provide them with you for you. But like at least the counseling center, at least Psychology Today, at least a friend. But yeah, those are kind of what just coming to my head.
Yeah, awesome. And we'll try to get those either on screen or somewhere in the video description so they're available for our folks at home.
Amazing.
And yeah, so thank you for that. So kind of in the same vein, what are some of the like the most beginning foundational kind of levels of things you can do for yourself if you're just getting started? You've listened to this episode of the Career Corner and you're going, "Oh my gosh, I need to start loving myself." How do you get started on that?
I always say to my clients, always are words, always and never are words I try to stay away from in therapy, but I tell them like it's so idiosyncratic, meaning it's like so, I don't even know if that was the right word, but it's so unique to the person you are. Like I would ask you, probably you would probably have a different answer than like the person that I'm seeing in an hour. Like I would probably say, what would make you feel good right now? Or what is one thing that you've been wanting to get started on that you haven't? And I feel like so all this to say is self-love isn't the same thing for everybody, and it's not going to look the same for everybody. Absolutely start with your foundations of like, are we feeding ourselves well? Are we getting good? good night's sleep? Are we procrastinating? Maybe we should stop doing that and figure out why we're doing that. And like really looking at our schedules, I think like getting ourselves in a position where we're setting ourselves up for success is so important around this. And like really getting into like a state of flow or like really adopting healthy habits. But like from that foundation, it's like, okay, are we going to add the gym on? Are we going to add on like, I don't know, like meditation? Are we going to add just going out with friends once a week? Whatever it is, it's going to be like very nuanced to the person that you are. But I think absolutely having like a solid foundation, a solid like routine, because that helps our nervous system, in addition to maybe like these like little extra things that are going to create feelings of safety or feelings of like healing our nervous system. But again, those are going to be like unique to each of us. And don't trick yourself. Like we all absolutely know what they are. It's just like it's a little bit about listening to our intuition and being real honest with ourselves and not being afraid to like start that thing that we've been wanting to do.
Yeah, awesome. And we are approaching the close of our time here, but we still have some time. And there is like a straggler question that we didn't quite cover. And the segue wasn't there, so this is the segue. I've artificially injected the segue to this next question.
Perfect.
You mentioned earlier a misconception that a lot of people have when I asked you, do you have to love yourself before you can love somebody else? And you said, well, no, not really fully, that, but pay attention to it. But I wanted to ask you here, are there any other misconceptions that people have about self-love or relationships that you want to clear the air about here?
I think many people think self-love means reaching a point where they feel completely confident and never struggle with self-doubt again, or that a healthy relationship means always feeling connected and never experiencing conflict. In reality, both require consistent effort, reflection, and grace. So self-love isn't about always feeling good about yourself. It's about showing up for yourself even when you don't feel good about yourself. And relationship care isn't about avoiding difficulties. It's about navigating them with respect, communication, and mutual understanding. So the real work is in how you return to yourself and to each other again and again. I tell my clients often, I'm like, I don't care how many times you fall back, you fall off, you fall down, like it's about getting back up. And that's the biggest piece about this. It's about how you show up for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And Arielle, before we end our time here on the Career Corner, what final piece of advice would you like to leave with our listeners, whether they're starting their self-love journey or they're in a relationship? What are we leaving the people with today?
Okay, the most important part of cultivating self-love is creating a life that truly feels good, not just in these fleeting moments, but in a deep, sustainable way. So build a foundation within yourself that you can always return to, routines and habits. When your Sunday scaries, anxiety is on 100, it's like, what are we doing to take care of that? So just kind of going back to those things I said before in terms of building the foundation.
Incredible. Well, Arielle, thank you so much for coming to talk to us today on the Career Corner, just in time for Valentine's Day, for people to get situated if they were kind of feeling weird about any of this stuff. Now they know they've got some strategies, some good, incredible baseboards to start off of and push themselves in the right direction. Again, Arielle, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you and happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day, folks at home. You don't even have to wait for our next episode to get career guidance. You can visit drop-in hours in Muller Faculty Center 101 Mondays through Fridays. I'm pretty sure we might have to retake that, but I think I've said it enough times that I've got it locked in. Folks, I'm Lucas Kaufman, and this has been Career Corner.